So, for anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Mo. I have a BSc and an MSc in ecology and a PhD in evolutionary biology and genetics. I worked in science research for more than 10 years. That was the cat letting herself in through the cat flap. She's probably going to do that a lot, but we'll just ignore her. So I worked in science research for more than 10 years, but now I mostly do science writing. My friends and family have asked me to do these videos because there's so much misinformation out there about the COVID-19 vaccines. And worse than that, there's this kind of climate of mistrust that's stopping people from, stopping them from having them, and also just not really sure whether they're going to get them or not. And I think that's mostly because of a lack of information. And in the media, there's lots of talk of, they're brand new, they're like nothing we've had before. People are worried they're not tested enough. And the media say, oh yeah, it's RNA and it messes with your DNA and things, without actually explaining what the hell any of that means. And it just leads to people being really worried. So my hope is that I can fill in a few gaps and then people can make educated decisions for themselves. So I'm doing a few different videos. I'm doing one on how the vaccine works, another one on how we got it in a year and why that's not a scary thing. And I'm going to do a couple that try and respond to some of the points that anti-vaxxers have brought along and try and dismiss a few or dispel a few myths on there. So today I am going to talk about how the vaccine works, and specifically about the DNA and the RNA part of things. I'm going to keep it really simple and basic because I think most people know little bits about DNA and RNA but might not know the whole picture. So I'll just try to paint a loose picture for you so you can get an idea of how these things work. So our bodies need to renew and replace new cells all the time. Hair and nail cells are probably a good example of that. And the instructions on how to make those new cells are all written down in genetic code and stored in our DNA. Our DNA is really tightly wrapped inside structures called chromosomes. And in every single cell of the body, you have 46 chromosomes, all packed full of DNA, which is miles and miles of genetic code, inherited by our parents, and that tell our bodies how to make just about every cell in the body. So I find it useful to think of DNA as being like a master cookbook full of recipes. And each recipe has the genetic code for how to make just about every cell in the body. And because it's the master copy, it needs to be kept really safe. So your chromosomes are locked away in the heart of every cell inside a structure called the cell nucleus. And the cell nucleus is like a cell within a cell, really, because it's got this really strong membrane around the outside of it. Stops anything from getting in and damaging those precious master copy of the recipes. However, we still need to get access to those recipes, and that's where mRNA comes in. The M stands for messenger, because mRNA is actually able to access that cookbook. It can cross the cell membrane, it can take photocopies of the recipes when we need them, and it brings them outside the cell nucleus and feeds it into something called the ribosome. And ribosomes are able to read the genetic code there on that recipe, and they use that to make long chains of proteins. Those chains of proteins then go outside the cell and off to the relevant body part to make eyelashes or lung tissue or whatever they are. The mRNA inside the vaccine is also a recipe card, but that recipe card doesn't actually have the genetic code to make human cells. What that genetic code is for is to make the tiny proteins that are found on the outside of the COVID-19 spike. And the COVID-19 virus uses that spike to attach itself to cells and actually to wiggle inside cells, and it's the part of the COVID-19 vaccine that the immune system would normally see. The recipe card inside the vaccine only codes for that spike. It doesn't actually make a virus itself, so you can't catch COVID-19 from this vaccine. So what happens then is when you get the vaccine, the mRNA recipe card in the vaccine gets inserted into your ribosomes, and your ribosomes obediently follow that recipe, and they make these little proteins that are normally found on the COVID-19 spike. They make those proteins and then send them outside the cell. And that's where your immune system, which is constantly patrolling around looking for anything dodgy, spots those proteins, says what the hell are they, it tags them, and it makes antibodies which specifically kill those proteins. Those antibodies are then stored on file, so that should you come into contact with the actual proteins, if you would get the COVID virus for real, so from some selfish git that wasn't wearing a mask, for example, then your immune system goes, oh yeah, we know what these are, goes straight to its filing system, pulls out the right antibody, and it sends them straight to those viral particles and kills them before you get an infection all around your body. So that's the way it works. And at this point, you still might be feeling a little bit unsettled and think, it's still something to do with DNA, and it sounds like zombies and robots or something are going to take over. So there's two really important points to bear in mind at this point that might make you feel better about it. The first one is that the mRNA recipe card inside the vaccine, once it's gone into your chromosomes, it's all used up when it's read, so that's gone. The protein spikes that are made by the ribosomes get killed off by the immune system, so they've gone. So once you've used up all the product that's in the vaccine, it's out of your system and it can never return. It in no way does any permanent changes at all to your body. It doesn't affect your DNA in any way. And once you've had it, you've had the proteins, you've had the proteins have been made, they've been eaten up, and it's gone. It's a one-shot deal. And actually, that's why you need the booster, because the whole point of the vaccine is that it's a kind of a one-off shot to try and train your immune system to recognise the virus, make the right antibodies for it, and to get on top of it. And the reason why they have the booster is just to make sure that you made enough antibodies the first time around, because it's so briefly inside your body. So really, you've got two options at this. So the other thing to bear in mind is that everything I've just described to you is exactly what the real virus does if it gets inside your body, because viruses can't live for very long outside their human or animal hosts. They literally don't have the machinery to reproduce. All they are is a little strip of mRNA wrapped up in a lipid nanoparticle, much like the one that's in the vaccine. And as I say, they can only survive within your body. So they don't, exist in the wild anywhere, for example. So say, for instance, you've got the virus inside you and you cough and then you touch a surface, then those viral particles will live on that surface for between 3 hours and 3 weeks, and then that'll be the end of them. Unless somebody else comes along, touches that surface and gets viral particles on their hand, then they touch their mouth, their nose or their eyes, and that way the virus will then enter their body. Once the virus is in your body, it will get inside your cells and it will insert its mRNA recipe card into your ribosomes. Your ribosomes will obediently follow that recipe and churn out brand new shiny COVID-19 viral particles. So the other thing to think about there is that you don't just have one ribosome in your cells, you have lots and lots of ribosomes, and you've got millions of cells. So very quickly, just from a few viral particles, you've ending up with many generations and proliferations of the virus, basically. So you can either have a virus enter your cells and take over your mRNA and your ribosome machinery and have a field day, and hope that your immune system that hasn't had the vaccine gets on top of it quick enough, it can detect it, make enough antibodies to knock that virus out before you get ill or worse. Meanwhile, passing on those viral particles to everyone around you who you know and love. Or you can get a vaccine, and which takes over your machinery slightly as well, but very, very briefly, and then it's out of your system and then it's done. And they're basically your two options. The Pfizer and the Moderna COVID vaccines, they use mRNA, exactly how I've just described it to you. The AstraZeneca virus uses DNA instead of RNA, and it does that because the DNA molecule itself is much more robust than mRNA. It's a double helix, so you don't need those crazy cold -80 fridges, and it's much quicker and cheaper to make as well. The delivery method's slightly different. I won't go into details on that here because that'll take another 10 minutes, but I will make another video on that. So if anyone wants to know the details on that, just leave comments in the section and I'll do something on that. But the thing to know is that it does exactly the same thing. It gets your ribosomes to make these little proteins that are found on the spike, and it's then presented to the immune system. So really that's all the same. So hopefully that will give you more of an idea about what's happening, and you can make an educated decision now about what you want to do. And to be really honest with you, I hope that educated decision is that you get the vaccine, because the reality is the longer this thing's out there in the human population, moving in and out of people, reproducing every 24 hours in those people, the more it will mutate, because that's what viruses do. They've been on Earth for as long as we have. They've shaped our immune systems, and in turn our immune systems have shaped them into lean, mean fighting machines. So there's one thing that these viruses do, that's all they want to do, is just to reproduce and spread throughout the population. And in order to do that, they become agile and clever little creatures that are really, really good at evading our immune system. So the people who've made these vaccines have given us the advantage. They've taken us ahead of the virus by a few generations. So at the moment, if we get this vaccination, we could actually get rid of this virus. We could get ahead of it in the race, and we could maybe even eradicate it. But the problem is, the more we fanny about, and the longer we leave that thing out there within us mutating, then we lose that advantage, and we could come to a point where we can't use that vaccine anymore, and then we're screwed. And I know that there's lots of people out there who don't trust big pharmaceutical companies, and I get that, because the reality is in the past they've been caught lying, like the big tobacco companies and things in the 50s and 60s, they've lied to sell their products for profits. So we know they can't entirely be trusted. And, we know of HIV medication and insulin that is prohibitively expensive to buy in certain countries, even though it's cheap to make, and that's disgusting. And why it's not regulated more, I don't know. But the point is, by having this vaccine, you're not putting your trust in those pharmaceutical companies. The people who you're trusting is the people who make those actual vaccines. And I can tell you, as a scientist, those people working every day at their lab benches, slogging away to make this thing, aren't thinking like that. This is a global collaboration of amazing scientists who've, down tools on what they were doing and got together to get this thing out there. They were given a problem to solve, and they've solved it. And we need to take advantage of that. And if we don't, then we're fools, basically. Getting this vaccine is also not about trusting the government. I, for one, definitely don't trust the government, particularly the UK government. And anyone who's watching this now is probably thinking, oh my God, she's going to start ranting about the Tories again. And I'm not, because this isn't the time or place. But I just want you to realise that having the vaccine is not about trusting big companies. It's not about trusting any government. It's much bigger than that. I put my trust in those people who've made these vaccines. And also I think we all have to balance between, the anger and the mistrust we feel at big corporations and governments and the way that they sometimes treat the masses, against hundreds of thousands of people dying of this thing, and hundreds of thousands of people more living in misery of long COVID. And not only that, the whole time our economies are collapsing in on themselves. So if you are one of those people who think that COVID-19 is a hoax, then unfortunately I don't think I can help you very much. But if you are one of those people who just doesn't quite know because they've not had enough information, then I hope these videos help. And as I say, please, put comments, ask questions. If there's any other videos you want, looking at specifics, then I'm happy to do them. So go for it. And I hope it helps. I hope you get the vaccine, because we just want to get our lives back. And if you do, and this helps you, then let me know in the comments, and I will raise a glass to you on the other side of this. So look after yourselves, take care, and see you on the other side.